Hey folks, I'm Dennis. Today, my handsome and talented son Connor and I are going to show you how to change the front brake pads out on a 1993 to 1997 Ford Ranger two-wheel drive with split pin calipers. Thanks for watching my video. Let's get started. First thing we have to do is safely jack up the truck, put a jack stand under it, and remove the front wheel and tire. Alright, so the difference in split pin calipers and a lot of other calipers is a lot of the other ones have a bolt that, or a guide pin, a threaded guide pin that goes in either through the front or the back that holds the caliper onto the caliper bracket, which keeps the brake pads on the rotor. Split pin calipers, there's a split pin in here and in here with a piece of rubber in between them that applies outward force to keep the pin in place so that the caliper doesn't move. So what you have to do is you've got to drive these pins out. They've got a little reset or a little detente on each end to kind of hold them in place. So you have to drive them out to get the caliper off. These split pins have a little ridge here and here that help lock them in place so that they don't slip out. So the first thing you got to do is you've got to get the ridge behind the lip on this caliper bracket so that the pin can actually come out. Squeeze that a little bit and then give it a couple of taps on your pliers to get that ridge behind the lip here, like that. You see where, I don't know if you can see that on camera or not, but it's a little compressed now. So now I can take a drift or a punch and get that pin the rest of the way out. Like that. Once you get it far enough out of the back, well, then it'll come on out, and you can see what I'm talking about here. The pin is split, and then inside it's got a rubber section bonded to each side that helps hold it in, and then you can see these little ridges here that hold on to the outside of the caliper bracket and keep it from coming out. You do the same thing on the bottom. Give it a squeeze. And then tap it to where these ears get clear of the caliper bracket. Like that. And you always want to inspect your pins and make sure that they're not, coming apart or separating, anything like that. These look fine. Now I think it's best to try to compress your caliper at least a little bit before you pull it off. You can either use slip joint pliers, water pump pliers, or use like a C-clamp. Or you can usually get them off and then just compress it after it's off the rotor, but I kind of like to compress it just a little bit before I take it off anyway. It doesn't take much. Right here's the piston, and you don't want to squeeze the boot, because if you squeeze the boot you're going to tear it up. That's this part right here is metal. You can go in with a pair of water pump pliers and just kind of gently, get in there on the lip of the piston and on the back of the caliper like that, and just give it a little bit of a squeeze. Just open it up a touch. Then the caliper, you just slide the caliper out. Don't let it hang from the brake line. You can turn it and get it upside down, and then you can get to the brake pads. Now, one of the pads didn't come out. There's the pad, and there's a shim a lot of times behind these, so you got to be aware of that. But that's how the pads are setting in the caliper. And of course, they go on a rotor. You want to inspect your rotor when you take the pads off. These rotors are in good shape. There's no gouging. They're nice and smooth, and everything's fine. So we're just going to replace the pads today. Let's see if I can show you this. There's an ear here that locks into this little ear, and then there's a clip here. So all of that holds that outer pad in place. So you gotta push back against this clip and get that ear out, and then the whole thing just pops out. And a lot of times you can balance your caliper like this. If you can't, wire it up, wrap you a piece of wire around here and tie it to the coil spring or something so you can work on it, but just don't let it hang from your brake line. Now that you've got the pads out of there, what I always do is I take one of the old ones and I stick it in there backwards, so I've got a metal surface to press on. Take a pair of water pump pliers and use that to compress the caliper, because you're fixing to put new pads on here which are thicker than the old pads, so you got to leave yourself room. What you want to do is just gently apply pressure, and you see how it's squeezing that caliper in. And there, that's got that all the way in. You can see how the piston now is inside the caliper cylinder, so now we just created a lot of space. We just went to our local parts house and got brake pads. The ones with the clips are the outers, and the ones without the clips are the inners. They've got these already came with a anti-squill shim on them, which is that, so make sure you don't lose that. It just goes on there like so. It's got a couple of ears on it. It'll keep it on the back of the pad, and that'll keep that helps keep it from squealing. Now you take your new pads. The one with the clip is the outer. You're gonna line it up, pop it in there. Make sure that these ears here and here are clipped into the caliper, like so. You got to make sure the front and the back are clipped in, and that this clip is engaged on the outside, because you don't want that going anywhere. Just like that. So take your inner shoe, make sure you hold your shim on there, and there's a lip here on the bottom of the caliper bracket, and then there's one right up here on the top of the caliper bracket where this part of the brake pad slides into these rectangular ears. So what you're going to do is you're going to set that in to match the curvature of the rotor. Put that ear in there, and then put that ear in there, and then it'll stay put. And then you're going to slip the caliper on over the brake pad. The outer is clipped in, so it can't go anywhere. Make sure you don't have your brake line in a bind. And then you're gonna slip the caliper in over top of the inner shoe, or the inner pad. As long as you've got the channels lined up for your split pin, then you know you're in there all right. So basically like that. Yep. Then you take your split pins and you drive them in. You can drive them in from the front or the back. It's easier to drive them in from the front. The way these things are made, you can see that one side is smooth. This is the side that goes toward the caliper, and then there's a cutout on these ends, and that goes toward the caliper bracket. because you want all of this part to catch on the caliper bracket. So basically it goes, you know, with the top one, this goes toward the top, and then with the bottom one, it goes in like that with the reset toward the bottom, because it's catching on the bracket and not the caliper itself. So we're going to take the top one, we're going to put it in like that, just like so. And you can kind of set it in there by hand, and the same thing with the bottom one. We're going to take it, and it's going to go in the other way with the recess in the bottom. And we're going to get it in there and push it in by hand. And then all we got to do is tap them in. Got to be able to hit it. Once you get them driven in there far enough to where this little ear catches, that little ear that's on the end of this split pin, it'll catch up against the caliper bracket here. You won't be able to drive it anymore. So that's why it was so much easier to just drive them in with the hammer. You basically just tap them in until that stop hits here, and then it can't go anymore. And then the same thing with the bottom. So then we're done with that. Other than pumping up the brakes, we just got to do the other side. Okay, now give it a couple good whacks. Like a road grain just flying rust.
The metal.
Make sure you're metal to metal.
Yeah.
And it don't take much, just enough to loosen it up a touch.
There we go.
Yep.
And then it should just come up.
Should just slide out.
Okay.
You just make sure you don't drop it, you know.
Yeah. Well, maybe grabbing the bracket doesn't help.
Yep. Here you go. Nope. Other way. Go clockwise for your because of your line.
Yeah. So like that.
Yep. There you go. There you go. Perfect. Put it in there backwards.
Yeah. No wait.
The other way. There you go. With
And
the
then
metal to metal, and then squeeze it right. Because that brake pad face is not going to tear up your piston. And those pistons are kind of brittle.
Oh, okay.
And I've seen people pry against them,
Yeah.
and they chip them. Just kind of slow and steady,
Yeah.
so you don't kill your master cylinder.
All right.
Put that one in the caliper bracket.
Yeah. Oh, I see exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, there's a couple of ears in there.
Yeah. And it just sits there, right?
Yeah. Slide all the way up against the rotor.
All the way up against. Okay.
Yep.
Got that.
And make sure that shim's in there right.
Yes. That's
Okay. Hold on to your caliper so it don't fall.
Yeah.
And check the ear on both front and the back, or top and the bottom.
Yep. There we go.
Out on the end, you know.
Yeah, yeah. That one's good. That one's good.
All right,
Not
good.
going anywhere.
And you're going to go counterclockwise to relieve. Yep, there you go. Yep.
Sure, everything's lined up.
Nothing. You got it. It's fine. Fine. Just got to push it harder. Take your hammer and tap it.
Huh?
Take your hammer and tap it.
keep going.
Yeah, tap your bottom one in a little bit. Yep.
Try not. All right.
Good. Next thing we have to do is to pump up the brakes, because once you've compressed the caliper cylinders, pistons, there will be a gap between the new brake pads and the rotors, so we have to pump up the brakes. So don't just jump in your truck and start driving, because your brake pedal is going to go to the floor. So what you do is get in your truck, crank it up, pump the brakes, leave it in park with the emergency brake on, the parking brake on. Pump your brakes, so go all the way to the floor. Do that 4 or 5 times till they feel normal, and then your brakes are going to be pumped up. And the last thing that you want to do is you want to kind of burn in the new brake pads. Most brake pads are pre-scorched anymore, so it's not as critical, but I think it's always good practice to burn them in a little bit. Basically what you want to do is, once you've pumped up your brakes and you know that they're fine, go out, get the truck up to somewhere between 30 and 40 miles an hour, no faster than that, and put your brakes on, not hard enough to lock up the tires or anything, but put your brakes on pretty hard so that you stop in a fairly short distance. Do that about 3 times. That'll help burn in the face of the brake pads so that they don't glaze over and become slick. Yeah, it just keeps your brakes safer, and I believe it makes your brake pads last a little bit longer. Thanks a lot for watching my video. I appreciate it. Hope you look at some of my other videos. We have several on the channel for various do-it-yourself projects, car repair, home improvement, shop topics, things like that. So if you would, share a video around, subscribe to my channel, and like this one. Thanks a lot, and I hope to see you back soon.